but anyway, as we were preparing to leave, Dana checked us in, of course, the obligatory 24 hours in advance before we left, and I was dismayed to find out that Dana got pre-check, but I didn't. We were flying together. We bought the tickets together. We're flying together. If she got pre-check, I should get pre-check. I didn't get pre-check. Why is that important? I hate waiting. Who likes to wait in the security line at the airport? No one. We live in a fast food society. We want things, we want it now. There's a commercial on TV. It's a 30-year-old song. It was written in 1989 by Bryant, lead guitarist, backup vocalist for the rock group Queen. You know which one I'm talking about? It's 30 years old. This is a prevalent feeling in society. I want it all. I want it all. I want it all. And I want it now. That seems to be prevailing thought as we go through. We want technology that's faster and faster. We can't wait for the old boot up of the system. It's got to be now. We've got to have internet that loads instantly. Can't wait for it to load. We want things, we want it all, and we want it now. Disciples of the Lord must be committed to waiting. We are most pleasing to God when we do wait. If you would, be turning with me over to the book of Psalms. I want to thank Dylan for reading the 27th Psalm. We'll be back to that through the course of the lesson this morning. But I want to start out in the 33rd Psalm. Let's look at verse 20. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. Flip over to the 62nd chapter. In the 62nd chapter of Psalm, verses 1 and 2, truly my soul silently waits for God. From him comes my salvation. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be greatly moved. Over in the book of Isaiah, as soon as I can get there. I use a smaller Bible because it's easier to handle, but it's not easier to see. It's one thing I have had to wait on, and that is getting old. In Isaiah 33, chapter 33, verse 2, O Lord, be gracious to us, we have waited for you. Be their arm every morning, our salvation also in the time of trouble. So as you can probably tell by the songs we sung this morning, what we've already looked at in the scriptures so far, I want to talk about what it means to wait on the Lord. Why is waiting on the Lord so important for us? Why is waiting something that is so hard for us to do, but yet to be pleasing to God, it is necessary? Take a few moments to look at that. I'd like to suggest 4 attitudes that must come into play to be a successful waiter, if you will. The first one is confident assurance. We've got to be confidently assured of what we are waiting for. Does everybody here this morning fully realize and comprehend what it is that we as Christians are waiting for? Should we be waiting? It's a question that maybe only you can answer. What's comforting and what gives us confidence is that God is the creator of all the universe. And because of such, there isn't anything that we need to be worried about or anxious about or disturbed or distressed or panicked or fear or terror or trepidation. And none of that should have any consequence for us. But yet it does. We need to realize that God delivers those who trust in him because he is dependable and trustworthy. He is our rock. He is our redeemer. Therefore, we should wait on him with complete trust and total confidence. You have a group of verses listed there. We're not going to read them all. I was thinking to myself this morning, when Art got up here Wednesday evening, he said he's only going to be about 3 hours. Well, I'm not going to be that long. I'll do my best to try to keep it under 2 hours. But there you are. But anyway, you can see on here we have some verses that are highlighted, 2 verses continuing or that ended what Dylan read for us earlier. But before that, if you would, turn to Psalm 37 and verse 5. Psalm 37, verse 3. And we'll read through verse 5. Would help if I got out of Isaiah and back to Psalm. Psalm 37, beginning in verse 3. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. And if you would, flip over to the 125th chapter. Psalm 125, verses 1 and 2. Those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be moved, but abides forever. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people from this time forth and forever. As we read these verses, is there anything in there that gave you comfort, or did you skip right on over the words? Oftentimes when we read passages, we look at them and we read them without really reading them, without really seeing them. The Psalms are full of that. We're going to spend a majority of our time this morning in the book of Psalms. And just an encouragement to you that when you look, these are comforting words. At the end of the lesson, we're going to look at some practical application. And we're going to talk specifically about this church here, this local work here in Kaysville. Some things that have gone on and some things that have happened recently that are just, to the individuals that they've happened to, are just sheer joy. We're going to take a look at that, but it all comes down to waiting on the Lord. In contrast with God's omnipotent power, our strength indeed is small. In comparison with God's eternity, our days on earth are fleeting. The span of our years is nothing. The works of our hands will not endure. Understanding our own incapability, we need to therefore wait on God. Look specifically again at Psalm 27 that Dylan read for us a little bit earlier. In Psalm 27, in verses 13 and 14, I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. Over in Proverbs, 3rd chapter, if you wouldn't mind turning over there. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. I know this is familiar to a lot of us. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Look at that. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Jesus commands us in the New Testament. It reminds us, I guess you would say, about the greatest commands and how we are to love God. We are to love God when it's convenient for us. We are to love God when there's nothing else to do. We are to love God at the end of the day. Does that sound right? No. We are to love God with all of our soul, with all of our mind, with all of our strength, and we are to trust in the Lord with all of our heart. You know, we, as humans, we lack stamina, we lack strength. But we take comfort in the fact that God's might is never diminished from weariness or fatigue. If we can just learn to exchange our weakness for his strength. If you would, turn back to the book of Isaiah. I'd like to read a passage that I like. In fact, you will probably recognize. In Isaiah, the 40th chapter, verses 28 through 31. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might, he increases strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. You know the significance of an eagle? The significance of an eagle at the time that this book was written? Do you know what the significance of an eagle is today? What does an eagle signify to you? It's our national bird. It's a symbol of the United States. It's a symbol of freedom. But what the eagle signifies, and what it signified back here, and being lifted on the wings of eagles, is strength. The wings of eagles will lift us up. That is the strength of God. His grace is sufficient to meet all of our needs. When we collapse with fatigue, he doesn't faint. When we've tried and failed, he lifts us up, and he quietly encourages us to try again. When we grow weary and think of quitting, he never wearies or gives up on us. Instead, he renews us with his strength. He enables us to overcome all obstacles. And some obstacles take a long time to overcome, but he gives us strength to overcome them. He empowers us to rise up on the wings of eagles. He does for us what we cannot do for ourselves. He liberally supplies our every need, and because of that, we are not partially, but wholly dependent upon God. The second point I'd like for us to consider is a patient endurance. When you think of patience, biblically, is there a name that pops in your head? The name of Job. What Job put up was patient to endure is a great lesson for us all. But why is patience so important? In this life, inevitably, we're going to face difficulties. We're going to face trials. It's going to happen. Just as we were assured in the New Testament, it's going to happen. We're going to face things that maybe we wouldn't face if we didn't profess to be Christians, if we didn't profess to be followers of Jesus. Things are going to happen to us. There's things that's going to happen to us outside of who we follow. Just in this normal walk of life that we have, there's going to be difficulties, there's going to be trials. Oftentimes we try to grin and bear it, but sometimes it does get us down. Patience enables us to stand up under pressure. It is a staying power of life. It gives us tenacity to see things through to the end, if we have that patient endurance. It helps us remain steadfast, regardless of the circumstances of life. When at times our situation may seem dark, it may seem hopeless, but patience doesn't admit defeat or throw up its hands in despair. It doesn't become discouraged. It doesn't become bitter. Rather, it helps us react properly to the challenges of life. If you will just turn over to the New Testament, we're going to look at the books of Hebrews and James. We'll go to James first. In James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. The 5th verse should be very familiar to you. It was just read a little bit earlier this morning. Over in the book of Hebrews, just turn the page back one page. Hebrews 12, verse 1. Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. The Bible teaches that God delivers those who wait patiently upon him. We mentioned Job. What about Abraham and Sarah? They were in their 90s. They were waiting for a child. They were in their 90s. I don't know about you, but when I'm 90, I don't want to have a child. But Abraham and Sarah did. They waited on God. What about the children of Israel in Egyptian bondage? Look how long they waited. They never lost hope. They never gave up. We must not be troubled by the apparent injustices in life. It's easy to become outraged at life's inequities. Nothing is so finely felt as unfairness. Everybody in here embrace something that they feel is not fair? Do you take it and say, oh, well, that's the way it goes. That's life. No. At least I don't. I don't know about you. Over in Psalm 40. In Psalm 40, the first 3 verses, listen to what it says. I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined to me and heard my cry. He also brought me up out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock and established my steps. He has put a new song in my mouth, praise to our God. Many will see it in fear and will trust in the Lord. Turn over back a few chapters again to the 37th chapter. This time we're going to look at verses 7 through 9. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who brings wicked schemes to pass. Cease from anger and forsake wrath. Do not fret. It only causes harm. For evildoers shall be cut off, But those who wait on the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. Oftentimes we don't think things are fair. But we must never, never think about returning evil for evil. God will set all things right. He will. I have confidence in that. He will vindicate the righteous, and he will punish the wayward. Wait on the Lord. Turn over to Proverbs 20. In Proverbs 20 and verse 22, we read, "Do not say, I will recompense evil. Wait for the Lord, and he will save you." Let us never forget that Christian faith looks beyond this life. We look beyond this life to the next. We anticipate the Lord's return. Faithful disciples of Christ patiently await the coming of our Lord and Master. You can read that in 1 Corinthians 1:7, 1 Thessalonians 1:9 and 10, and 2 Thessalonians 3 and 5. What I want to do is I want to move on to the next point, and that is steadfast hope. Hope. I was going to say something, but it's going to give it away, so we'll give it away. Turn to Hebrews 6. I was going to try to cleverly lead up to this point, but everything that I was going to say to make it clever just gives away the verses. So, Hebrews 6, beginning in verse 17. Thus God, well, let me look at this and make sure I'm in the right place. Yep, okay. Beginning in verse 17. Thus God, determining to show more abundantly to the heirs of promise the immutability of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath, that by two immutable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we might have strong consolation, who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope set before us. This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which enters the presence behind the veil, where the forerunner has entered for us, even Jesus, having become high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Funny thing about an anchor, it's kind of insignificant when you look at the overall bulk of a ship, especially one of the large ocean liners. An anchor, it just kind of hangs off the side on the front. But it's there when it's needed. It's always there when it's needed. But what does an anchor do? The anchor of a ship is let down, and it goes down into the murky waters of the deep, and it fastens itself to something. That little anchor, that little insignificant anchor, compared to the girth of the ship, you wouldn't think that that little thing could do much of anything. But when it's, as the words of the song, grounded firm and deep, there's nothing that'll move that ship, and that ship will stay safe. Just like that, we as Christians, we need to send our anchor upwards into the celestial waters of heaven. In 2 Peter 1:4, it's not on here, but in 2 Peter 1:4, Peter tells us that we have been given exceeding great and precious promises. Our hope of realizing these promises is anchored in the very character of God. That should automatically lead us to patiently wait on the Lord. But as we wait, we wait with a sure expectation and a steadfast hope. Turn back to the book of Psalms, if you will. We'll look at Psalm 130. We'll read a couple verses here to go with the point that was just made. In Psalm 130, verses 5 through 7, I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I do hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than those who watch for the morning, yes, more than those who watch for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is mercy, and with him is abundant redemption. In Romans 8, kind of had a little bit of a heart flicker this morning when in class when we went back to Romans 5. It's like, uh-oh, they're tiptoeing around where I'd like to go, but let's go to Romans 8. We'll look at verses 33 through 35. Who shall bring a charge against God's elect? It's God who justifies. Who is he who condemns? It is Christ who died and furthermore is also risen, who is even at the right hand of God, who also makes intercession for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Who? Are you going to separate me from Christ? Jason, am I going to separate you from Christ? Paul assures us, shall tribulation on this earth, shall distress, shall persecution, shall famine, shall nakedness, shall peril, shall a sword separate us from the love of Christ? Only if you let it. Turn over to Galatians 5. We just got through studying this, and I know we talked about it in class, but I'd like for us to look at it again. In Galatians 5 and verse 5, for we through the Spirit eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. What is that hope of righteousness? What is it that we eagerly wait for? This hope of righteousness by faith? What is that? We'll come back to that. The fourth point is willing obedience. We must have confident assurance. We must have patient endurance. We must have a steadfast hope. And we must have the willingness to obey. I'd like to look at a situation in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, in the 10th chapter. If you mind turning over there. For those of you that may not off the top of your head remember what's going on here in Acts chapter 10, but it has to do with someone who was seeking. Someone who was seeking God. And his search was answered for him. We're not going to go through all of Peter's vision and anything like that, but I'd like for us to take a look at the attitude of Cornelius as it's laid out in the book of Acts. In Acts chapter 10, look specifically at verse 24. And the following day they entered Caesarea. Now Cornelius was waiting for them and had called together his relatives and close friends. Obedience and waiting, and more specifically the waiting part of it, implies that we must have a listening ear. It describes a heart that is responsive to the will of God. It is displayed in the attitudes of Cornelius, his kinsmen, his friends, his family, who eagerly awaited apostolic guidance from Peter. Look at verse 33. So this is Cornelius. So I sent to you immediately, and you have done well to come. Now therefore, we are all present before God to hear all the things commanded you by God. I'm going to get into this a little bit later because Jordan McPherson, where are you? Raise your hand. You supplied my closing line tonight, this morning, and I don't think you even knew it. How many of you have ever eagerly awaited something? Ryan and Mandy eagerly awaited the arrival of another child, and that realization came this morning. I know people eagerly await the premiere of a movie. People eagerly await football season. I'm lost without football. Not really, but I love to watch football. We eagerly await things. We understand that. We eagerly await the realization of the smells that smell so good as you're sitting in the house, knowing that such a fine meal is about to come. We eagerly await. Cornelius, his family, and his friends, they eagerly awaited the arrival of Peter. Do we have that same eagerness? If you would, turn over to Proverbs 8. Proverbs 8, beginning in verse 33. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not disdain it. Blessed is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the posts of my doors. For whoever finds me finds life, and obtains favor from the Lord. Watching daily at my gates, waiting at the posts of my doors. Is that the attitude we have when it comes to God and serving God, listening to God, and obeying God? Is that the attitude that we have? Willing obedience. There's not anyone here this morning that I would guess that would rather do anything than wait. In our hurry up and wait society, this is something that I get to do tomorrow. We rush to the doctor's office only to wait. We rush to work only to get stuck in traffic. For this reason, waiting carries negative connotations. Waiting is not something positive in our minds, but it is when it comes to waiting on the Lord. If you would, turn to Lamentations. We're going to bring this to a close here in just a second. Lamentations. Okay. Right after Song of Solomon. Sorry. You ever have one of those moments when your brain just won't work? No matter how eagerly you're trying to crank it to get it started, it just won't work. Lamentations 3, 25 and 26. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should hope and wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Isaiah 64. If you wouldn't mind turning back there. Isaiah 64 and verse 4. For For since the beginning of the world, men have not heard nor perceived by the ear, nor has the eye seen any God besides you. Listen to this. Who acts for the one who waits for him. The Lord acts on our behalf when we wait for him. Proverbs 37. Wait, I'll get there eventually. I wrote down Proverbs. It's got to be Psalm. Did anybody find Proverbs 37? No? Well, wait, you will. Yeah, it was Psalm 37 and verse 9. For evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait on the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. And then back to Isaiah 40. These words are contained in several songs that we sing, including songs that we sang this morning. And I want to thank Zach for leading those songs. Let's begin in verse 21 of Isaiah 40. Have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. He brings the princes to nothing. He makes the judges of the earth useless. Scarcely shall they be planted, scarcely shall they be sown. Scarcely shall their stalk take root in the earth, when he will also blow on them, and they will wither, and the whirlwind will take them away like stubble. To whom then will you liken me, or to whom shall I be equal, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes on high, and see who has created these things, who brings out their host by number. He calls them all by name. By the greatness of his might and the strength of his power, not one is missing. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my just claim is passed over by my God? Have you not known? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might he increases strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. It's kind of hard not to break out in song when you read the 31st verse. I know we read that once before this morning, but with those thoughts in mind, I want to bring this home to us. There have been things over the past several months, things that this congregation faces with individuals. I'm not going to mention any individuals by name, but this is what got Dana and I started on thinking on this subject. I'll list one individual by name, me. I never thought in a million years that someone at the age of 61, I know I don't look it, do I? I feel it. At the age of 61 would be sought after. That their experience and what they did would be appealing to someone. Generally, it's the other way around. and I've felt this or experienced this over the last several years, is that once they realize how, how old I am, they want to go with someone half my age. And that's understandable. They're going to be around a lot longer. But it was very satisfying to know when someone seeks you. And I got to thinking, is that how God feels when I seek him? Wait on the Lord. We have individuals in this congregation that have faced some pretty serious health issues. And one just recently, praise God for, finding out that there was nothing to fear there. But when we bow in prayer and we cast it all on God, wait on the Lord. We are thankful that prayers were answered and a serious health issue was averted. We are thankful that prayers were answered to where another serious health issue is soon to be recognized as soon as the name works up the list. We've had numerous individuals in job situations, employment situations, that's been a strain on them. It's been a strain on being away from their family. It's been a strain on being away from their brethren. Wait on the Lord. It's no longer a strain. Finding someone to spend the rest of your life with comes much earlier than it does for some others. But even in the later stages of youth, a helpmate is found. Wait on the Lord. When you find yourself in an employment situation, it's not a good one, and it doesn't lend itself to being a Christian. As hard as it may seem, wait on the Lord. It'll be rectified, and the answer will be there. And finally, it's been 6 months. I think you know what I'm referring to. We've been without a preacher now for 6 months. Some people are saying it's been 6 months. Or you can look at it, it's been 6 months. Wait on the Lord. He will show us. He will give us what it is we need. All we have to do is have confident assurance, patient endurance, steadfast hope, and then the willingness to obey, a willing obedience. I saw a post, I believe it was Friday night, on Facebook by one of the 29 members of the Premier Brigade. I wrote it down. Okay, maybe I am going to call one individual out by name, Jordan. Do you remember what you wrote? Do you remember what it was about? There's a lot of hype over Avengers Endgame coming out. 29 members of our congregation went to see it. The quote, "It's totally worth the wait, folks." You remember that? That's exactly what God tells us. It's totally worth the wait, folks. Wait on the Lord. Lesson's yours. Do with it what you will. But if in that it spurs you to do something about the situation that you're in now, you need to take care of something. Publicly, privately, doesn't matter. You have the opportunity this morning to take care of it. If you haven't been patiently waiting on the Lord, take care of it. Take care of it now. Take care of it today. Tomorrow may be too late. But please, do something. Get it right with God. And get it right now while we stand and sing.